In life, there are a huge amount of patterns, arrangements that govern our world. From time arrangements, breakfast, lunch, dinner, morning, day, night, to social arrangements. You should wear these colors in winter. Don't wear white after Labor Day. Fork on the left, spoon on the right. To even cultural arrangements, whether or not you're supposed to look people in the eyes, whether or not this is peace or swear. So what I want to talk to you today about is that there's a difference between participating in these arrangements in a meaningful way and being taken by these arrangements and becoming nothing outside of them. So, basically, the way that works is there are people who will almost always try to follow as many arrangements as possible. These are people who are seen as classicalists. These are people who are seen as traditionalists. These are people who basically are going to try to follow the fundamentals that have been laid out before them. They adopt this idea that if it worked well in the past, it will continue to work well. This is not to say that they won't try to build on it. There are very many innovators and inventors who will adopt the usage of arrangements that have been laid out before them. But at the same time, since they're doing this, they're coming from a very historical perspective. They're coming from a very, this happened before. If we follow what happens to prevent it, we can prevent it again, this type of ideology. And there's good and bad sides to people who follow this type of arrangement following. There's the productive ones who are able to understand that this was our past and that we can use the knowledge we gained from this to create a future that is varied from the past, that is different from the past, and that is contextually unique from what has existed before, creating new arrangements of ideas for us to follow, for future generations to follow. And then there are the people who will abuse this type, and they will be so stubborn and set in their ways that they will not accept any movements away from the arrangements that they are familiar with. And then if you look towards, on the other hand of this, you can look towards people who don't follow arrangements as often, who don't follow arrangements as closely. These are people who are generally considered somewhat derogatively the hippies. They're somewhat considered as the innovators. It's not quite a fair term for them, since you can have innovators who follow arrangements that have been laid out before. But these are the people who are constantly seen as trying to move. They're constantly seen as being rebellious against what has come before and trying to change that. And again, with those who follow arrangements of data, those who choose not to follow arrangements will generally fall into the two groups. The one who is the more predominantly healthy group, the ones who want to change the arrangements in which we live our lives, not because the bad ones are seen as, or the old ones are seen as bad, but because they're very concerned with every point in time is unique in its context. Yesterday holds different ideas and beliefs and knowledge than today or tomorrow will. These are the people who respect that we came from a past that thought a certain way and arranged themselves in a certain way, but we are no longer that people. We are not even the people that we were yesterday. And then again, of course, you have the people who are going to be completely unhealthy with the way they go about not adhering to arrangements. These are people who are just going to rebel for rebellion's sake, who are so distraught, angry, bored that they will fight against everything that has been taught to them, fight against all their cultural arrangements, fight against all of their social arrangements, even try to fight against natural arrangements that can't be fought against, just to make a point that they do not want to be a part of the current arranging, of the current system. So from these groups, you have a healthy outlook upon arrangements in your life, and you have an unhealthy outlook of arrangements in your life. And you have this adherence, the strict adherence to arrangements of the past, arrangements that have been laid out before you. And you have a loose interpretation and a loose adherence to these arrangements that have been laid out before you. And so from this, you have an interesting little spectrum. You can think of it as an X and Y axis, if you so will. We see so many of those everywhere, where you can kind of more or less chart yourself on this idea of, do you hold up the values and applications and arrangements of the past, or are you trying to be one of those that completely changes it and tries not to adhere to them themselves? You can change them and adhere to them, or you can change them and not adhere to them, and it's all part of the spectrum. Are you one of those who's doing this for a cause beyond yourself, or is your motivation something that began in yourself and became something bigger, something that was big and you found out that it became something really personal to you? All of this lies within a spectrum, and in this spectrum there are an infinite number of points. Like, as with any spectrum, there are an infinite number of points and an infinite number of numbers anywhere along this spectrum that you can put yourself in if you so desire. So basically, the point that I'm trying to get at in a really roundabout way is that there are arrangements in the world. Some we follow, some we don't. No one adheres to all of them. No one is able to not adhere to all of them. So we live in a world of non-absolutes. And each of us finds a place somewhere in the midst of all of these non-absolutes, and we plop ourselves down and we say that we have found our home. Whether that be to follow and build upon the arrangements of the past, or look forward to try to create the arrangements of the future, we all work somewhat in the same spectrum. And regardless of our religious views, our political views, our personal views, our social views, our economic views, our views about what happened last week on that television show that no one remembers the name of, but everybody watches. Regardless of all of that, we all live in this spectrum of arrangements. We all adhere to arrangements. And the fact that we all have the same arrangements, whether or not we choose to follow the same ones or not. The fact that the same arrangements are put before all of us is a pretty cool thing. It's pretty universalizing. So the point I'm really, like, it's not coming out very well, but the point I'm trying to make here is that nothing is an absolute. That's nothing that's never been said before. Nothing is an absolute. But at the same time, nothing is purely an absolute. We may have different ideas on literally everything, but we have differing views within the same spectrum. We follow different arrangements. We've arranged ourselves in different ways. If each possible arrangement that's brought before you is a piece of you, and as much as you chose your position on that arrangement, then you are just the culmination of a bunch of pieces. And this piece may be different than anyone else's piece, but it comes from the same box. So, in lieu of a lot of things that have been going on, I just thought it'd be prudent to point out that despite the fact that we're different, and we always will be different, and these differences can be incredibly vast and sometimes ungappable, despite that we all are still kind of fighting the same fight. And it's kind of humbling when you get to sit down and think about it. So, let it be known, arranging things is relatively important because there's sometimes an infinite number of ways to arrange them. Thank you.